Have you ever looked at the M48 and the M60 and wondered, these things look very similar. What's the difference between the two? Well, I mean, one's a premium and one's not a premium. So, what's the main catch with the premium versus the non-premium? Well, today we're going to answer this question. I'm your host, Derpy, and joined with me today is M48, a good friend of mine, and he's going to break down the M48 while I break down the M60. So, without further ado, I'm just going to quickly hand the mic over to him, and he will divulge a little bit more about the M48, and then we'll follow up with the M60. So, please, M48.
Well, thank you, broski. Anyways, I prefer the M48 patent over the M60, and in order for me to really break down why, I need to discuss the three things that go into consideration when, judging a tank. Now, the first of those I'm going to cover is mobility. The M48 patent is slow. It's the slowest tier 10 medium in the game, at going only 45 kilometers an hour. And, I mean, it has decent rotation speed at 50 degrees a second, but the horsepower at 810 horsepower is not spectacular. However, the tank doesn't feel sluggish. It gets up to that top speed relatively quickly, especially on like harder terrain, like flat, level ground. It doesn't really struggle getting up to that top speed. So, however, there is a disclaimer. This tank does not lend itself very well to going up slopes. As you can see in this clip here, I'm actually going up a very slight grade to try to run into that T110E5, and I'm only going 22 kilometers an hour, so the speed gets cut in half, on very, very slight slopes. So, engine power is a little lacking, I guess. Now, it's not like as if this tank is just completely immobile. It's still capable of getting from one side of the battlefield to the other. Like if you see, if you're on one flank and then the other flank starting to kind of crumble, like if you read the map very well. So, it's not terrible in that sense. So, this is why I wanted to talk about this first. It's easily the weakest capability of this tank. Now, of course, this tank, I believe it's like a jack of all trades, master of none, but still better than a master of one. It does a lot of things very, very well. However, the weakest thing about it is the mobility. It's slow. It only goes 45 kilometers an hour. It's only 16 horsepower per ton. It could be quicker. But to me, that doesn't hold the tank back terribly. It's able to get into position. It's still able to climb hills, albeit slow. But it's quick enough to where it still gets the job done. Now, this leads me to my second point, which the speed kind of gets sacrificed for, and that's armor. So, the M48 patent, in my opinion, is probably the second or third best armored medium tank in the game, probably behind the Object 430U. Now, the turret of this tank is phenomenal. The front of it, the mantlet, of course, the area directly around the mantlet. That's where you want to catch shots. That's what you want to present to the enemy. You have 9 degrees of gun depression, so you need to use it. You need to use this thing in ridgeline situations. You need to use it to where that's all you're exposing to the enemy. Now, there is a weak spot. It's a cupola on top of the turret, but it's not as bad as the M60. It's a little bit more incognito. And, if you're able to use your gun depression, it's low enough to where you can kind of hide it. Now, the hull armor, it says it's 152 millimeters, but as you can see with the armor viewer, it's different in spots. However, the hull is actually boat-shaped. It's kind of like an Object 140. If you ever look at a 140, the sides of it are slanted downward. So, side scraping is an option. However, it's not totally reliable. So, keep that in mind. But the armor of the M48 patent is pretty good, and it's better than the M60. This leads me to the third and final thing about a tank, and that's, of course, the gun. The M48 patent has the M60 805mm, Of course, 268 millimeters a pen, 0.36 accuracy, 100 meters, and of course, the APDS rounds fly at 1478 meters per second, which is really good. Basically, what that means, anytime you pull the trigger, the round instantaneously hits the enemy, or at least it seems like it. This makes leading enemies really easy. This makes, once you acquire a target and shoot, you know you're dealing damage in a very quick fashion. So I always used to joke with my buddy Zach and say that this tank was basically John Wayne, because the dispersion values when moving and when turning the turret are not bad. They're slightly different than the M60s, although I think the M60s are just a touch better. And also the M60 is a little bit more accurate, but it's just like the feel of this gun, like it feels that you can just quick draw on people. And as far as leading, like that T100 LT I just shot at, basically, like my rule of thumb is if I see an enemy like running, from side to side, like across my face, pretty much no matter how fast he is, I just aim at the front drive wheel and you're always doing damage. So because of the shell velocity flying through the air so fast, that's definitely to me like the strength of the M48 Patton. Like the gun is just wonderful. The gun with the combination of the armor with the turret, it's fantastic. I mean, it works. Just plain and simple. I managed to do really well with it. Like I said, the gun just, always works for me. But really quick though, I gotta point out both the M48 and the M60 have 420 meters view range, which is the best in the game. Which leads me to believe that the M48 Patton is the best all-arounder in the game. A true jack of all trades, master of none. But anyways, Derpy, how could the M68 Patton be any better at all?
Well, B-Mount, the M60 makes up for a lot of the flaws that the M48 has. Right out the gate, the M60 has 140 more horse souls trapped in that engine, making what was a 45 kilometer top speed a 60 kilometer, which is a absolute dramatic increase to its ability to form. You'll see in the gameplay here that the issues of hills are no longer a challenge. But don't let the horses get to you. The M60 is a ton lighter than the M48 because most of the armor has been shaved off. The result of this, well, see for yourself. The M60 has the same gun as the M48. It performs mostly the same with a slight twist. You see, because the M48 is the predecessor to the M60, logically the M60 will have better technologies in it. As a result, the gun is extremely accurate. Even to M48 standards, accuracy at 100 meters, 0.33 versus the M48's 0.36. Aim time is 1.6 seconds versus the M48's 1.9. This makes for a very snappy tank, and I mean snappy because you go from 60 kilometers to a dead stop and you can immediately lock onto somebody and pretty shoot them with some decent accuracy. However, like an uneven rug, you solve some issues in Creedmoor. It's taller, has a bigger cabin cupola, and it's slightly longer reload. Honestly, the height to this tank is very slight in comparison to the M48. The cap's cupola is a big problem though. When you're peeking over hills, you're going to see that, or the person below you who you're going to shoot down on is going to see that cap's cupola first. It is very protruding and not as much as a cancerous growth as the AMX30s, but if you get up to speed, you don't really notice it because honestly, it just goes from side to side, side to side. You're constantly moving with this tank. The armor is definitely something that may be needed on this tank, but seeing as how it's 180 millimeters in some of the most key parts of the tank, I feel like you'll have that occasional surprise bounce more often than not. So I don't think the armor would be that much of an issue since we did go down a little bit. It's kind of like that French thinking when they brought into the development of the MX30. Since guns are going to penetrate no matter what, why even have armor, you know? So they, as a result, made their tanks more mobile, you know? So I feel like this is a little bit more of a French train of thought with this tank, but this tank feels like it should be in place of the M48. Only because the M46 is not very that armored as well. You know, they don't really have that much armor leading up to it, besides, like, you know, something like the Pershing where you can aim down. You know, it teaches you that, but, you know, the M46 doesn't have that much armor, and maybe it just has a really funny angled turret, you know. So I feel like this tank would fit naturally there than here, because there's no tanks that have armor pretty much leading up to the M48. Okay, so let's talk price. The M60 is a premium 10, and it has 450,000 free experience just to get the thing, right? But if you use resource conversion for 1 gold for every 25 experience, that comes to a grand total of 18,000 gold, or $80 of your real money if you want to, you know, use resource conversion. That's where the M48 comes in as kind of like a replacement for this, because honestly, you can pretty much grind that for free and get it for free, you know, all at the expense of your time. I don't like this. You know, I feel like the M60 should be with the M48 on the tech tree, but I can see why they would want to make it a premium tank, because honestly, it seems like it's a better tank. You know, it feels more well-rounded versus the M48's. You know, it is a jack of all trades, master of none. But, you know, where it lacks is, I feel like, is going to be the speed. The speed is very important to me, only because I see armor as more of a safeguard versus, you know, as a tool. If I'm out there on the field, I don't want to be shot at, you know. Yeah, I might bounce a shell, yeah, I might have to take a shell for the team, but at the same time, you know, the more health I can preserve, I'd be able to, you know, maybe clutch something for the team, or, you know, be able to use it more handily, you know. So if I'm stuck out there in the open, I can quickly get out as well. You know, that's one of the benefits of speeds. You know, I can quickly switch between flanks, you know, within seconds. You know, the M48 has to kind of think ahead a little bit, but not too far ahead. You know, it's not a heavy tank, but it behaves like a heavy medium versus the scout medium. And that's another benefit that the M60 has, is that you are able to play more like a scout tank in this tank. You know, you have one of the best view ranges for medium tanks, period. You know, having the speed to combine with it, you know, it makes it more of a scout medium versus the, you know, the slower heavy. Going over hills, it feels great. You know, the fact that I'm able to do my damage, get the hell out, you know. But ultimately, that should be the goal with any tank I feel like I should play, is that I shouldn't take any shots at all. You know, the fact that I'm getting shot at means that I'm making mistakes.
Well, Derpy, you've certainly brought up some very compelling points as far as, you know, what you believe makes the M60 better. Granted, like I said, I prefer the M48, but, you know, it is worth mentioning that the M60 does have a lot of, you know, statistical superiority over the M48, which, you know, I'm more than willing to go over. Like you said, probably the biggest advantage is the mobility. You know, you get 15 more kilometers an hour, you know, 20 horsepower per ton versus, you know, just almost 17, and even get a better fire chance. So, yeah, that's a plus. And then the guns, the M60, of course, has better aim time, has better accuracy, has better dispersion on the move, both with the turret and with the tank. But the M48, pretty much all it gets is better DPM. So, and of course, both guns have 9 degrees of gun depression. So, not really an advantage right there, but pretty much everything else is better. The M60, of course, it turns faster, it has better terrain resistances. The turret of the M60 turns faster. Of course, both of them have 420 meters view range. Of course, I mean, even the radio is a little bit better with 5 more meters of signal range. Now, the part of the tanks that I truly feel that the M48 is actually better, of course, is the armor. You view armor more as a safeguard. I view armor more as an ability or a strength. You know, if I'm able to expose a part of my tank to the enemy and have a pretty good confidence in not taking any sort of damage, or maybe, you know, they're firing high explosive, you know, minimizing damage, to me, that's an absolute strength. Now, of course, that's more of a difference in preference. You know, the point you brought up as far as not getting shot at all is also a pretty good point. But then again, for me, I do really well in my Centurions. So, I mean, they're pretty much hull down specific vehicles. You know, you get them on a ridge, you know, with your 10 degrees of gun depression, your amazing turrets, and you just go to work. And, you know, as far as the Centurions go, that's pretty much like my bread and butter. Now, of course, your mileage may vary. As far as hull armor, the M60 is more of like a straight kind of shape. Of course, like the front of the hull being more like angular. And of course, you do have that tremendous weak spot at the top with your Commander's Cupola, which the M48 kind of has, but obviously not as much. And of course, with the M48, you know, you have more of a rounded hull, more of a boat shape, to where you're a little bit more keen to get like troll bounces. Like pretty much when it doesn't seem like you should, you end up with it. There is one thing I want to point out. The lower portion of the hull armor, or the side armor for the M60, is only 35 millimeters thick. Which, if you know anything about overmatch mechanics, that means that the caliber of the gun shooting at you needs to be 3 times larger in order to overmatch. So 35 times 3 equals 105. So anything over 105 millimeter can overmatch you. You know, like I said, this is more of like the lower hull, and then of course the rear hull of the vehicle. So you definitely need to keep that in mind if you're going to try to expose your side armor. You know, like I said, 120, 122 millimeter guns will have no issue penetrating your side armor. And of course, in certain spots, not the entire side. But something I wanted to point out. Now, the M60, like you mentioned, it is like an advancement technology, like what France was trying to pull off with the AMX30B, and of course what Germany was trying to pull off with the Leopard 1. You know, both of them viewed armor as kind of inferior, which I actually go over in my Bush Sniper video. Check that out on my video, or check out my channel, shameless plug. But basically, both countries felt that armor was going to become inferior to, you know, the advancement of shell technology, which they were onto something. And of course, you know, they developed really good tanks in response to this. You know, hey, our mobility is going to be our armor. And of course, the M60 patent's no different. You're sacrificing armor and a little bit of DPM for pretty much the advantage in every other category, like statistically. Like on paper, the M60 is just a better tank, you know, in the garage. As far as it being a premium, as far as it being, you know, what, $80 if you're gonna convert all of your, you know, free experience. I mean, I think that's a little steep. I mean, granted, it is a tier 10 premium. You know, I don't think that those kinds of things should be cheap. But then again, I mean, $80, I mean, that just seems a little steep to me. But, you know, as far as whether the tank's worth it or not, I mean, if you're a big fan of the Leopard, or, you know, obviously the big fan of the AMX30B, then yeah, I guess it is. If you're willing to part with $80, you know, of course it's $80 American, then, you know, this tank's for you. It's, you know, the maneuverability, the good gun, you know, not the greatest armor, but, you know, hopefully like your speed and, you know, maybe map awareness, or, you know, good positioning, like, can make up for it. You know, I mean, this thing can get into good positions very quickly. And, you know, if you're a good player and you know, like, good strategies as far as, like, you know, how to start off a match and where to be, then, you know, this tank will it suits you very well. Of course, I prefer the M48 because I like to be able to show off a little bit of my tank and, like, not necessarily be afraid. So, I mean, like, with the hull down capability, the good armor, like, for me, it's just a better fit. Of course, you know, if you're more of like a mobile, like run around, shoot 'em up player, the M60 is probably the tank for you. So, anyways, Derpy, I guess, what do you have to say to that?
Well, let's talk about the M48 real quick. So, it has a higher DPM. Yes, that is true. It's got 2900 as opposed to the 2700, which is about half a second quicker on the reload. And being able to shoot faster in a battle and being able to dish out damage more effectively is very important, especially for a medium tank. Where the M48 comes in strong is that it is more of a second play to a game. So if you visualize one game, you'll have scout tanks that rush forward and they're going to try and spout. The M48 is more of a support to a scout versus the M60, where it can be a scout and it kind of can trade back and forth. The M48, honestly, having it as a second play is not a bad thing. You know, you said you're good in your Centurions, and that's also another good second play tank. Okay, so let's put into perspective a game of World of Tanks. It's now a 1v1 situation. You have just cleared out the artillery from their base, and there is a heavy tank capping our base. And it's not looking pretty good because it's got like a minute and a half to get across the map. The M60 will clear that 1 minute 30 gap and have a good amount of time left over. The M48, you know, it might come down to the wire if you're going to get across the map, you know, but you could always rely on the view range of said M48. That is if you have a shot on base. So let's talk a little bit more about the armor. The armors is what basically gives the M48 its charm. It's kind of like your Huckleberry, where it's a great fallback plan, you know, especially if, you know, you lose your flank and then, you know, you kind of have to stick it in reverse and you just gotta kind of look forward, shoot while you're backing up. You know, it's great because you don't have to worry about, you know, getting out of there quicker. You can get out there at your own pace because you have armor to fall back on. The M48 has always been a cheaper alternative. It's free pretty much if you can put the hours towards it, you know, and you grind for it, but like it also provides you with a great sense of accomplishment. I mean, when you buy a premium tank, that's it. You just buy it, you know. When you go for the M48, however, it is more of a sense of accomplishment, like, hey, I worked through this, I went through the Pershing, I went through the M46, I went through, you know, some of the more key tanks in the game, so you get a little bit more of an experience, you know, facing up to different tanks. I mean, I tell you what, I mean, one of the greatest tanks that I always enjoyed playing was the E2, the Jumbo. The Jumbo, you know, kind of sets you up in a situation where, like, hey, this is where it could go for medium-wise, but this is where it could go for heavy-wise. So just having the sense of accomplishment is one thing, you know. It feels like, you know, you got your hours worth. It feels like you know, you worked hard for something that could be worthwhile, right? But I still prefer the M60, mainly because it's faster, it's able to use its view range more, it's got good accuracy. It's on paper, like you said, it is the better tank. But as for like pride, sense of accomplishment, stuff that like makes you feel better, the M48 may come in better because being able to A, take a shot to the face, B, shoot really quickly, and C, you know, put in the hours and feel the difference between the M60 and the M48 is a big thing. And the player experience may be different versus, you know, just buying the tier 10 outright. Though the M48 may stand just a step below the M60, it will always hold that price tag over the M60's head, honestly. And that's ultimately going to be a deciding factor for these two tanks. I believe the M60 is going to be worth every penny for the advantage in mobility and accuracy. However, BMAT, I think this is pretty 50-50, so I think it's best left to the comment section. So, what do you think?
Well, Derpy, I think that both of our analysis of both tanks is pretty much spot on, and I believe that in the debate of the M48 versus the M60, it's more of two key criteria have to come to mind. Okay, one is obviously playstyle, and the other is obviously, you know, price. Now, as far as where both tanks differ, like in the playstyle department, I mean, it's kind of like one tank, like literally one tank is one flavor, and the other tank is the other. Like with the M48 has better DPM, but the M60 is more accurate. Even stationary and on the move. It has tighter dispersions and, of course, better overall accuracy. You know, the M48 patent has better armor, but the M60 is more mobile. So for me, that has, I mean, as far as like playstyle, it's like, would you rather be a tank that can go hull down very, very effectively and like deflect shots and, of course, you know, return fire, or would you rather be a quick tank that can get into position easier? You know, I mean, like you, I think you said, like, you can take like power positions in it. I mean, honestly, you're basically like a poor man's Leopard in the fact that, you know, you don't have the greatest armor, but you still have a really good gun. You're accurate, you're fast, you know, you can traverse the battlefield very well. I mean, there's plenty of situations where, like you said, you could be like on one side of the map. You could be like in the enemy's, you know, cap pretty much, like dealing with Artie. And if someone's going to start capping out your base, pretty much in that situation, you and I and pretty much everybody would rather be in the M60, because you know that no matter what the situation is, you're going to be able to get back and do something about it. With the M48, like, yeah, you probably could, but going 45 kilometers an hour, like, if you're on a map that has a decent amount of hills, like between caps, I mean, it's gonna be a bit of an adventure to get back on time. So in that situation, along with, like I said, as far as trying to get like power positions early on in game, the M60 is obviously the better tank. But if you know that you can get somewhere, you know, maybe it's not just like an overpowered position, maybe it's just like a really good ridge line, or maybe not even a ridge line, maybe it's just really good, like, let's say you have like a rubble pile or something that, you know, you can hide your lower plate and, you know, still be in, you know, effectively a hull down position, you know, with a strong turret. You know, your commanders can pull, like, obviously it's a weakness. I mean, it's not nearly as much of a weakness on the M48 as it is the M60, but you know that you'll be able to take a little bit more advantage of, you know, a strength that the tank has. While with the M60, like, you're not necessarily worried about armor effectiveness, because in the M60 you're really just trying not to get shot in the first place, which is why I kind of, more so in console than on PC, but on console the M60 is pretty similar to the Leopard. Like, I think of the Leopard, maybe like the AMX30B, like tanks that, like, you don't really want to get shot in, you know, but they still have good guns. You know, they're quick, they're able to get strong, advantageous positions at the start of the match, excuse me. It's just, that's, if you're into that kind of playstyle, then the M60 is for you. If you're into, okay, I'm hull down, then the M48 is for you. That's just the difference in playstyles. If you're talking about the difference in price, the M48, yes, you can grind. You can, if you really wanted to be a free-to-play player, not give Wargaming any of your money whatsoever, you could get the M48 patent. Do I advise doing that? No. I think that players should, you know, maybe just put money in just to get like premium time, you know, maybe get some gold so you can convert XP, you know. But even if you just do that, you're going to be spending a substantially less amount of money than you would if you wanted to get the M60. Like, let's say I had, what is it, 450,000 free experience just laying around waiting to be converted. That's what, $80 to bring it, you know, from free, to bring it from XP that's, you know, effectively on your tanks, like premiums or whatever, into experience that you can spend, you know. Or if you really wanted to get the M60 as a free-to-play player, you would have to grind just endless amounts of hours to bring in 450,000 free experience, instead of just having it on tanks and then being able to convert it, like if your tank's elite or if you have a premium tank. The second criteria, like I said, as far as having price, the M48 is obviously the cheaper pick, and I agree with this. I think that the M60 is, on paper, it's probably the better tank. Yeah, it has less armor, but like the gun's better, it's more mobile, you know, it even has, I think, a less fire chance. Like, just like random things about the M60 are better. Like, the only thing that the M48 really has is a better reload time and better armor, which, you know, that's all well and good, but you're slower than Moses. You know, this thing only goes 45 kilometers an hour, while the M60 can pull 60, but, I mean, granted, you're paying for the M60. So, I think you're right to leave it up to people in the comments, because, you know, some players are free to play, they can go grind the M48 patent no problem. Some players are wallet warriors and don't mind giving money to wargaming, to where, you know, the M60 is a perfectly viable pick. Like, they'll just, you know, flash out the credit card and boom, they have 450,000 free experience that they can go spend on a tier 10 premium, which I don't have a problem with. People like that, you know, they keep the game alive, so they shell out the money so wargaming, you know, can keep putting out a free-to-play game. So I don't really have a problem with either train of thought. But if you are a person that's trying to get, you know, either vehicle, obviously that's something that needs to be considered. So, but anyways, for those of you watching this, hopefully the back and forth that Derpy and I have had has been not only entertaining but also informational, to where, you know, if you are thinking about either getting the M48 or the M60, you know, now you have a little bit more knowledge, to where, you know, okay, with the M48 I'm spending time, with the M60 I'm spending money, or a lot more time. So you keep that in mind. Neither of these tanks are bad choices. I think they're both very solid tier 10 medium tanks. There are much worse choices for tier 10 mediums in this game. So, I mean, you could argue that both of these tanks are up towards the top. I mean, especially with like the meta, you know, that we see today. But your mileage may vary. Anyways, if you guys really enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to DERPdurDERP Productions. This dude's awesome. He's a friend of mine. I really enjoy his content, not only on YouTube, but also on World Tank Console Reddit. Dude just cracked me the fuck up. And of course, I have my channel, BMAT15. I predominantly do PC stuff, but I am going to start getting back into console. You know, I'll have some gameplay and stuff of like me and Derpy playing. Me and him actually got to get back on the sticks here soon. But yeah, fuck, I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys have a little bit more information. So anyways, take care, and I'll see you guys next time.